Tomasz, welcome to the show, my man.
Hey, how are you?
Am I pronouncing your name correctly?
It's good enough. It's Tomasz, but any variation thereof works for me.
I gotta tell you, what city are you in, and how did you survive? That's what I want to know.
I'm in Boston.
Boston, Boston.
Boston. So, pandemic had nothing on us. Honestly, it's just a typical day in traffic, in Boston traffic. That's what really gets you, right?
Exactly. That's so well said. Did you? I assume you stayed in Boston. Did you think about working remote in other cities, or based on the work you couldn't?
It's funny that you mentioned that. We did actually, moved out of Boston proper, and now I live in the suburbs. We kind of everyone moved to like a remote hybrid model of work. Yeah. What about you?
Exodus. I was in San Francisco, and thank you for asking. September, I did the exodus from San Francisco to Miami. I'm chasing palm trees and cool breezes during this.
Nice.
I think that's my anywhere. My anywhere is tropical. That's my anywhere. I also have family, and we've talked about this before in the show, and it's not about politics. It's interesting where you have California that was on lockdown, Florida that wasn't, both have ocean property and palm trees. I've gotten both my vaccinations. I'm still wearing a mask. I'm starting to go out, but it was just felt like the right time to get out of that city. And I was glad I did.
Right. Yeah, West Coast was hit pretty hard.
Yeah.
What can you do?
And you look back, I don't know which is right or wrong. I mean, it's maybe there's a hybrid, but what I've learned from this is as dark are the times that we went through, somehow we've survived. Some lost their lives, which is sad and tragic, but we're coming out of this with some new perspectives, telemedicine, remote work, hopefully a little bit of slowdown in people's day-to-day pace. I mean, these are things that are so important. And I believe that, from my nephews and nieces, the way they're schooling and being able to learn, it's been a beautiful thing. And the innovation that we've seen happen both in science and in technology and how people are shipping products in the last 10 months have just been exceptional. I mean, what have you seen that has impressed you about maybe companies shipping product, or just how we came to at least a designed vaccine? So you pick it up wherever you want to pick it up, Tomasz.
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I think, what has changed. Suddenly, there's been a push across the industry towards decentralized trials. And, the way I work at Pfizer, we're in the digital medicine. Pre-pandemic, we were very much focused on bringing that sort of digital aspect
right
to our industry, which traditionally has been very, conservative. I would say rigid, but because when you look at a typical drug development life cycle, it's like years, billions of dollars, and suddenly you're hit with. So we were ranking on that bleeding edge of bringing digital technologies, but the pandemic, I feel like it really sped things up or put a lot of pressure on that.
Would you be able to tell the audience what how I understand a vaccination is? I don't know if you can talk through that, because what I read is that this vaccination was designed. I'm not saying by design by Pfizer. I'm just using it as sometimes you find a vaccine, sometimes it happens by chance, but from our understanding, this was designed. And is there a difference between that? I don't. Maybe this is a different riff, but just so curious.
There certainly we've seen an unusual, probably a paradigm shift in terms of how vaccines are developed. Due to pandemic. There's only so much I can speak to what we've done at Pfizer, but we also had Moderna, right, following kind of a similar path. I think it's amazing that we had both companies, US based, kind of leading the world in bringing those vaccines first to market, and an unusually fast pace for the industry. But traditionally vaccines are always, there is a design aspect to it, right? It's not like, sure, there's some vaccines like with attenuated viruses that you just have to produce it in a way that it does not cause more harm than good, but there's always a design phase to it.
Got it.
The mRNA technology was definitely new and novel in that space, right? If you look at Moderna, their vaccine was their first drug. That was the first drug they brought to market.
Oh.
So that was definitely interesting. I do hope that, the question is, of course, how are we going to keep that pace post-pandemic? I definitely think that we learned a lot from it. So we might see a speed up, hopefully, in the drug development process. But, bear in mind that also it was an unprecedented influx of money and resources, right? The world pretty much stopped and focused on this one task.
So what was it like to be in your role in that industry during a pandemic? Are there nights that you just cry yourself to sleep? Are there nights where you just pinch yourself that you're lucky? Right? Just you or a medical worker are in a place that hopefully once in a lifetime, but like when you look back on it, what kind of emotions do you think about or you go through?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. You have to understand that a company like Pfizer has I don't know, 40, 50,000 people, 50,000 employees. And I do not, and I have not worked on the vaccine directly, right? But by virtue of being part of a company and that diverted and feeling that you may, in some way contribute. I think initially there was a lot of, disbelief. I remember trying to convince my wife that things are about to get serious. I think being within the industry, I guess we had more of a front side. We were a little closer to understanding what could happen if it gets out of hand. And definitely, it's not only in US, but there's been a bit of a, looking back, hindsight's always 2020, right? But we could have responded faster to a number of things, right? So I guess, I had the knowledge just by being in the industry that we're about to get hit hard. And, historically, getting a vaccine would have taken years. So there was also this dread that we may be in it for a while. And even now, there's light at the end of the tunnel, but, Europe is hitting a fourth wave. There's shortage of vaccines around the world.
Yeah, there's a lot there. On first the brand side, like you said, you're not part of that team, but you're part of the brand. I was lucky enough to get the Pfizer vaccine. When I think of great brands now, I think of Apple, I think of Pfizer, and I think of Walmart. Walmart did the pop-up where I got my shot. Pfizer is the shot that, I just won't forget that day. I just won't forget. So these are brands that mean a lot to me. Apple, I just always liked Apple. Who doesn't? But to me, I think they do a lot of things right. But if you would have asked me a year ago, Apple and Pfizer in the same top right quadrant of brands that I'm still very close to, I would have been like, not really. It's great to see. I think the brand has always been a solid brand, but this is a different connection I have to it.
Right. That's great to hear. Yeah, definitely.
And Walmart in Florida they were doing pop-ups. They were just saying, come to our specific location in our big parking lot. They had Walmart employees working through it. And the last one was the pharmacist. And there's a resilience that humans have. It's not Americans, it's humans, because there is people that worked on for Pfizer. I'm sure they're not all Americans. I'm sure it's different races, nationalities, and religions. It's humans. It's the humans that did this. We just maybe have a little special place in the world that it's all happening out of in this continent, but it's humans. So it's great to see.
Yeah, that was definitely uplifting. And we managed to pull it through.
Crazy. So now, where do we go next? All right. So now, telemedicine for me, and I want to talk about telemedicine on a different dimension, on a human dimension. It's nice not to have to take a vacation day now to go see a doctor. Isn't that nice? Because usually it's 1 hour to get to the doctor, 45 minutes in the waiting room to wait to see the doctor, and 7 minutes for him to see you and say, yeah, God willing, it's okay. Here's a cream or a prescription. How are you feeling about telemedicine and just getting your time back? Just time.
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I don't have that much experience in the telemedicine space, but certainly.
But you have experience in time.
Yes, there's been a change, right? Going to a school meeting or or a city council meeting, usually you'd have to like plan the trip there. Pretty much book your whole evening, and now it's just it's a Zoom call, right? And I hope it stays the same. I hope it stays Zoom call, because of course we miss that human connection, and telemedicine has some limitations, right? At some point you have to see a physician. They have to. It's not even about the there's just some limitation of the technology that we won't be able to surpass. Around resolution, the image. There's only so much you can produce on a flat screen, and at some point you have to do like things like blood samples. You have to put a stethoscope on someone to listen to their heart. There's something that maybe in a distant, not too distant future, we would be able to, overcome by using wearables, sensors. But still, there's some limits to the telemedicine that we won't be able to overcome that quickly. But all the other things. Go ahead.
Yes, you're right. I agree with you. I mean, there are certain things you can't do, but maybe that second visit. I think about during COVID, I've been trying to really get into some more mindfulness and self-reflection, and I think about the work from home, and maybe the part of the delight of working from home are just the annoying errands that we have to run, but now we can run them on a little bit of our time. Going to CVS to pick up a prescription doesn't have to be done at 5:00 anymore when you get out of the office before you take the train home. That's just nice, right? Or just whatever those errands are. I think you're Pfizer in New York City. I mean, there's a Duane Reade on every corner. And do you ever go to Duane Reade at the end of the day before you take the train home? You're waiting. So there's just things about this that are nice that I just don't want to go back. So when you look at your time, like,
I hear you.
Have you felt like you've been able to have more reflective, creative space to be more than to get to execution, and maybe your execution is different because you have a little bit more of space to think about? Like, how has that worked on you, that creative thinking, the reflective, the strategic thinking versus execution, now that you're home and you don't have people like, tapping you?
Wow, that is an excellent question that we could easily spend the rest of our time discussing.
Yeah, so, and I want to learn from you. Yeah, so you have to talk as much as you want.
I joined before I worked at Pfizer. I was like pretty much 100% remote. My team was remote. I work at Thomson Reuters, global company, teams all over the world. By virtue of being part of that company, you pretty much were in a way remote, because we had people in France or over Europe, or we had a client call in Singapore. It never really made that much sense, to necessarily fly and meet in person. At some point you did want that human to human connection, like an in-person meeting, but a lot of the time, it's just unnecessary, right? So I had a team of pretty much software developers, superstars. It was for their benefit that they were not and mine, that we were not in an office, just because of there were fewer interruptions. There's been a lot of research already, I think, around workplace, that there are certain job functions that require that protected space time almost, right? Because if someone is coding and you interrupt them with a question and take them like like an hour, half an hour to get back into that groove to do what they're doing, and might be different for some other jobs, like management. But there's some things that the open workspace that's so pervasive, it's not helpful, right? And then when I joined Pfizer, I had to sort of go back to being in an office, and we're a small team. The being there and being able to ask a colleague a question definitely helps with the interaction, but at the same time you get this almost kind of constant stream of being interrupted. And we seemed if you were in Kendall, like we're based out of Kendall, there's not that much space, honestly. So it's just the way offices are designed are not necessarily like geared towards that. But of course, you can always have some private time, go to a conference room, and so on. But definitely, it's difficult. There's some types of work that are difficult to do in an office environment. So when the pandemic happened and we moved to working from home, that wasn't necessarily that much different to what I've been doing before, but it was certainly different to the sort of larger organization. So and there were some technological sort of uplifts that we had to do as well. because that's why, Zoom pretty much exploded during that time. So there's definitely have been some challenges there as we, figured out how we do our work. Where was I going with that?
Well, yeah, there was a lot there in the sense of the critical thinking time. Are you a morning?
All right. So
did you block your time? Because I want to learn from you. Then I'll share how I do it. But I'm always fascinated by time. So I'm trying to get a sense of like now you're right. You got this opportunity to be at the big company, but still have that remote feeling. And how did you block your calendar? How did you change your day? Like, what tips can you share?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I do block my time. There's sometimes that I simply don't. I cannot be in a meeting because I have to, I have to run an errand. And if I were in the office, I would just leave early. But not being remote, you kind of have to be more transparent in communicating it. So using the calendar definitely helps. There's been some trials of putting like focus time on your calendar so that you don't get pulled into a meeting. But that has some limitations, of course, because, you do get some granularity, right? You have to be careful that your calendar isn't like fully blocked, because then people can't just, reach out to you, and they will just interrupt you when you're like in a meeting. So you have to leave people some space that they can actually get to you. But what, at the same time, the remote means that I stole it from someone. Someone said that, we're not working from home, we're living at work, right?
That's great. Heck yeah. And that's well said. Yeah, right. That's good. I'm going to steal that from you, by the way.
And the problem is, where do you set the boundaries, right? And I think definitely Pfizer is very, the organization is very well aware. It's part of the culture of the company, right? You need to have that some of your private time, basically personal time that is protected. And for me and my team, that's, weekends, right? Unless there's a fire happening, but it rarely happens.
For me, I do my best critical thinking in the mornings. So I try to guard anything before like 8:45 a.m. I do my critical thinking, critical writing. So I get up early, but I tried, again, when I wake up, I don't look at the news. I don't look at my emails. Like, I just need to get through some meditation, my journaling, and my critical thinking. Because, after 9 o'clock, it's still early enough, like you're not missing anything. And that is also most people's commute time. So I even feel like those first 3 hours of my day are just so much more focused, because as much as I try to do something maybe on the way to the train or the way to the car, but like someone cut me off, so I'm in a bad mood, or the train is running late, so I'm in a bad mood. So as much as I want to use that time to be critically thinking, the person next to me is talking too loud on his cell phone. The other person feels like they've never had deodorant on. Like, we've all been in those situations and they just take you away. So those are things that I look for. And as far as how you are staffing going forward, are you going to staff differently? Are you going to go more remote, or do you think staffing for at least your team and what you're working on, do you think you'll have to stay a little bit closer to the office?
That's an excellent question. And, as a follow-up, how do we go back?
Yeah.
Do we go back, right? We certainly already started hiring more remotely, just because, we're interviewing remotely. We can tell people that we want to bring them in, but it's not going to happen tomorrow or, in 3 months, or maybe next year, right? But, personally, I think that, the idea that you have to be in the same place all the time is a little bit outdated.
Yeah.
Again, just because I worked on a fully remote team, and people were kind of all over the States. And at the end of the day, if you're doing your job well, it shouldn't matter where you are. It's just a matter of having the right communication tools so that you can be effective.
Did you get a reaction on that, by the way?
But yeah, I don't know, because
I don't know either. But you're right. You're right about so many things. It's just like, we need to be flexible. We have to learn, and some of us just don't want to go back. I think so many things you said are just spot on.
Yeah.
I got my vaccination. I still wear a mask. I still haven't eaten inside. I still do takeout. But when we all feel a little bit more comfortable and we start traveling again, you are someone I'd like to have a drink with, and I'd love for you to just hang out with us. And I think that's weeks away. It's no longer months, but for me, it's not days, but I think it's weeks, which is good. I'm grateful for the brand that you work at, and I love what you're doing. And I think the big learnings for me are so many things that you said about the time, just how you guys were able to do this miracle. And this is a great show. I'm a fan. There are some people I'd love to introduce you to, and we are a community. And again, this community was started because of COVID. It was self-isolation. We wanted just to connect people because it's lonely. I am lonely. We are human. We are lonely. And these stories let us talk at the table about how was your day? Did you meet anybody interesting? We can finally say, yes, I met somebody new. So when I introduce you, what is there sectors, you would like me to introduce to, like 3, 4, 5 people? Are there knowledge? Like, who can I introduce to is in our network that just want to hang out with?
Yeah, I think data science in pharma. That's where I'm looking for connections. Data science, digital medicine in pharma. It's a close-knit community, but always good to.
Yeah, who's also part of this? Would you know, he's new to do you know Fernando Schwartz?
No.
Yeah, I'll connect you with him. There's so many people at pharma and hospitals that I'll connect you with that are doing so you want pharma, that's easy. There's some great people there. If you, in your travels, also meet some data scientists who are women in tech, we want to add more women to our network. So as in your travels, if you also see somebody or meet with someone that impresses you, that would be like to be part of a community of just meeting mindfulness, thoughtful people. We'd love to get that intro as well. Thanks for being part of the show. We are the Data Standard. We're sponsored by Pandio, and we're just lucky to have you on the show today, Thomas. So thank you for being on the show.
Thank you. It was a pleasure. Thanks.